Happy days when one of these arrives on the doorstep. It's a Banggood parcel. Consume.
Homebrew. Yes, that homebrew is really nice, but no, that's not what we're talking about. Hi, and welcome to the Art of Engineering, a place where engineering and art come together to make beautiful babies. Today, we are looking at the venerable art of home brewing. So strap yourselves in and grab yourself a nice cold drink, doesn't need to be alcoholic, and learn all about the joys of making your own equipment and perhaps also the frustrations. Back to the video. I meant the wonderful pastime of making your own amateur radio equipment. Now I know there's a lot of appeal in buying a beautiful rig with all the bells and whistles. I've been there before and I've done that also. And I understand now it's all the more enticing because the price of equipment has come down so much. You only have to look through catalogues from the 1970s and the 1980s. Around the mid to late 80s is when I was buying equipment, and what you pay now for a rig is probably cheaper than what I was paying back in the 80s when $1,000 was like, you know, it could be a couple of weeks' wages for the average person. So things have certainly become a lot more affordable on that front. Now, towards the end of my time in the hobby, before I had this resurrection, this renaissance of interest in the hobby, I got quite down about the fact that there wasn't a lot of home brewing happening, and I couldn't see the opportunities in making my own equipment. Fast forward now to 2021. I'm presently studying for an engineering degree, and you only have to go online and see the myriad of opportunities out there in the ham world. I thought continuous wave and Morse code was going to die, and being an ex-radio officer, that made me very sad because I put a lot of effort into getting fluent at Morse, and at one point in time 20 words per minute was where I could get to. I wouldn't want to be there now, but with time we may get back there. Homebrew gear. The period of time after World War II was really probably the halcyon days of home brewing, because after World War II a heap of World War II surplus military gear hit the shops and the flea markets, and people just had a ball arranging equipment, modifying equipment, ripping it apart, using it for parts, etc., etc. So that was the time where people learnt a lot. And I think what you've got to understand about this hobby is that radio is still an enigma for most people. And even for people who know a lot about it, you never can know enough. And I do know that looking at the gear that I've built to this point, it's very simple, it's very bare bones, but it does the job. And the thing about it is if my L-match antenna tuner breaks down, I can fix it because I built it. And if my Morse code key breaks or falls apart, I can repair it too because I went down to Bunnings to build that key. So if you want to know about that, click in the playlist, link below, and find the Homebrew Morse key project.
Damn continuity tester is too slow.
Oh well, I tried. So really, homebrewing gives you a real understanding or a better understanding of the equipment, of what you're doing, and I've got to say the satisfaction level is huge. So by all means, it's great to have that beautiful gleaming 1,000 function rig on the desk in the shack, and I'm not going to poo-poo on that idea. And I think that we all need to understand that everyone comes into this hobby with more of an interest in one area or another area, and the fact that it's such a colourful space to be in now. So many modes, so many different people, so many different interests. That's what will keep this hobby alive. That's what will keep ham radio alive. So it's wonderful that all of that is happening. But do not think that homebrewing is something that you shouldn't have a go at. I've got to say, at least give it a go. Your understanding of electronics, your understanding of the equipment that you're using, even the high-tech equipment, will be improved markedly by an interest in homebrew. Okay, I'm sounding a little bit like I'm proselytizing it presently, like hallelujah, homebrew all the way. But truly, homebrew is the place where you should be, and you should at least give it a go.
Happy days when one of these arrives on the doorstep. It's a Banggood parcel, and as suspect as that sounds, Banggood is actually a company that sells electronics. So get your mind out of the gutter. This is, or I might have to get my mind out of the gutter. This is a prototyping board that I ordered. I've got lots of interconnectors so I can play around with prototyping. I bought like a heap of connectors because they always fail. And then I got a whole heap of this stuff here. Now, all these little bits and pieces are for building DDS, digital data synthesis, variable frequency oscillators. So, you know, anyone that's not into radio communications might find that very pleasant and exciting, but for me it is extremely exciting. So we've got clock type chips, a couple of those. I ordered a couple of nano Arduinos. I'm hoping that that's what's in here. No, that's, I don't even remember what that is. All will be revealed shortly.
Now we've got all of this wonderful, really high-tech gear, stuff like Arduino, clock chips, all that sort of stuff. You can build a DDS variable frequency oscillator that will cover all of the bands, and you can build it on a little breadboard. So all very exciting stuff. Still an opportunity to go discrete components and go quite low tech, but still effective. Now I'm going to show you a website that has past issues of the Wireless Institute of Australia's magazine, Amateur Radio. And it's taken all of the old articles and it's been archived. So the gentleman that's done that, I will put a link to where that website is and where that information is. And I will strongly suggest that once you're an amateur, you should become a member of the Wireless Institute of Australia, simply because they are representing you and your interests within Australia. They're liaising with ACMA, the authority that oversees all of the radio spectrum. And really, we've got to make sure that we keep our hobby alive and vibrant, and by being a member of that organisation, you do assist in that process, and you'll get a copy of the up-to-date Amateur Radio magazine as well if you're a member. So all of those past issues are really fantastic to mine for older designs. Treasure. This is the historical Amateur Radio magazine, and on this website, link below, you can actually find past articles and past editions of the Wireless Institute of Australia's magazine, Amateur Radio, from 1933, which is almost as old as this computer I'm using presently, all the way up to, I think it takes us through to, let's have a look at where it takes us through to, the early 2000s, 2013. Obviously, if you want anything later than that, you're going to have to go to the Wireless Institute of Australia and have a look there. And like I said, become a member. But you can see here that you can actually find designs going back a really long way. And I've been mining the designs from the 1980s, around that time, purely because that's the sort of time I was sort of doing things as a lad. And also because we've got a lot of analog, very simple electronics that we can dive into from that site. And like I said, presently building myself a direct conversion receiver, care of Peter Parker. The actual design is on his website, so link below for that as well. But you can also find it here, and lots of other designs there as well. So, you know, if you're ever bored for a project to do, a simple project involving analog components, and you just want to dive into homebrew in a simple way, hey, why not come here and mine why not come here and mine the years and 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 years of articles. Treasure. I love treasure. And you can go to JCar and consume, because that's what's fun to do. Go to JCar and consume. Back to the video. Quite often, designs from the 1990s up to the early 2000s, probably even into the 80s, you can still find the parts for those designs at JCar. So you can go in there, buy all the parts you need, and build something that is getting on to 30, 40 years old, but will still do the job it was intended to do, and it'll still get you on air very simply and with a lot of satisfaction. I can get no satisfaction. I can get no satisfaction. That's the thing about home brewing that you will notice, is that even if you build a direct conversion receiver that has lots of interference, poor selectivity, poor sensitivity, if you manage to use that with a simple transmitter, the amount of satisfaction you'll get from that QRP, QSO, which is for the non-ham people, low power contact, you'll get a huge amount of satisfaction from that. I can get no satisfaction. And it's getting very hot in here, and this wig is starting to make me sweat. I nearly forgot to ask you. Please like and subscribe.
Back to the video.
This is our vector network analyzer, and we use it to check the performance of our L-match antenna tuners. I will link below to that video. So that's one piece of test equipment that just has made life so much more exciting and interesting, especially if you like to play with antennas. When I was a lad, quite often I would scavenge a part, and the markings on the part would not indicate what the values were. So it made things very difficult. Well, this is the very, very cheap and nasty multimeter that I bought, and it has a capacitance feature on it. And at the moment, that's reading 103 nanofarads, which is 103, or 0.103 nanofarads, sorry, which is 103 picofarads. And I can actually vary this. I'll just try and, actually what I'm going to do is I'll get this on a stand. And we'll do this properly. If you like to scavenge parts, quite often you don't know what the values are. And as a child, I would scavenge a part and I would have difficulty knowing what the value was. Quite often capacitors have the values rubbed off them, or they're not marked very well. And so you've got this dilemma of not knowing what the part actually does or what its value is. So we have these fantastic pieces of equipment now that allow us to get around that problem. And I've scavenged a variable capacitor out of that old clock radio that I've shown you in another episode. And what I'm allowed to do here is, on the simple meter that I've got here, it's in nanofarad mode at the moment. If I increase the value, you can see that the meter is climbing, and that's in nanofarads, but 0.055, so it's 55 picofarads. So it goes from basically 0 picofarads up to 100 picofarads. I've scavenged that capacitor out of the radio, and I know what it does, and I can use it in a small QRP transmitter or a basic receiver, and it will be useful to me. And to buy these at JCar, you're still looking at a few bucks, so that's $2 or $3 that I've saved myself by doing that. And you can use it to find values on capacitors, like I said. Another thing that I used to find quite frustrating was my inability to find values for coils, because quite often they'll give you a coil and they'll say use this ferrite core, and you can't find that one in Australia, or it's very hard to get, and you'll have a ferrite core that's different. So what I've done is I've bought this LC meter as well, and that's going to allow me to work out inductance values. So if you're doing RF projects where you're winding toroids and whatnot, or you might be doing traps for an antenna, this is a really great device to have. And I've tested it on the same capacitors and whatnot. It seems to do a good job. So I'm very pleased to have those two pieces of equipment, because it will allow me to homebrew, build tune circuits, etc., and know the value of the things that I'm working with. Only about $40 to buy, and I could only have dreamed of those sorts of things when I was a child. We're at the end of the video. I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's been a scatological day. One last thing I'd like to show you, because like I said, homebrewing has its frustrations, and the less frustrations, the better. So being able to find values of components easily, having test gear on hand is always great, but as you get older, you get blinder. And I just bought this thing. It's about $25. I've never owned something like this before. I've just spent a great deal of time soldering and burning my own fingers, etc., etc. It's basically a stand that allows people that are getting older and less able to see a way of seeing really, really, really clearly. So obviously not really, really clearly when the camera doesn't want to focus on what you're trying to get it to focus on. but trust me, it does work. And I'll be able to see when I'm soldering what's going on my piece of board here. I am building a direct conversion receiver, care of I think it's a 94 edition of Amateur Radio Magazine, Peter Parker, once again, and I'm hoping this time my building doesn't let me down. His designs are fine. My ability to build is probably the thing that's most challenging. Hopefully, in episodes to come, I will be able to show you a very basic direct conversion receiver on 80 meters, and we'll be able to see whether my antenna is actually picking anything up on 80 meters. Toodaloo, see you in the next video, and please remember to like and subscribe The Art of Engineering to find out more about ham radio and all things engineering and geeky and technical.